Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 5 of series 4 of the OTTRED Spotlight podcast. I'm lucky enough on almost a daily basis to come across many of the amazing people that we share this sector with when it comes to the commercial organizations, the technical organizations, and the innovators within our sector. The lady that I'm speaking to today, I'd probably classify as being somebody that could easily and naturally exist in any one of those habitats, and certainly somebody that's worked at some iconic brands, as well as being a startup founder and running her own organization with OTTRED Digital. So I'd like to introduce you to Nathalie Laithbridge. Nat, thanks for taking the time to be a guest on the OTTRED Spotlight podcast.
Thank you, Chris. It's a real privilege to be here. I'm very honored. Thank you. I know this community because I follow it, and I am very impressed by how dynamic it is and how passionate everyone is about this amazing industry we're privileged to be in.
Well, you're almost one of the founder members, Nat, so I'm sure that there will be lots of people within the community that will tune into this, both as a LinkedIn Live and then when we go onto Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well.
Thank you.
Now, you know that the purpose of this is really to bring the stories of thought leaders and business leaders to the rest of the sector so that people can appreciate and understand the complexion of how you've got to the level that you've got to. And similarly, within this series as well, I'm keen to talk about innovation and your perspective of what that word represents at this juncture in terms of the development of the sector, either from a commercial perspective, the D2C side, or even the technology that powers everything that we do. But what I'd love to start off with, Nat, is just an introduction from yourself in terms of what you've been doing recently, and then maybe a 35,000 feet overview of your career, because there are definitely some aspects of that career that I want to dive more deeply down into in the conversation that we'll have.
So, I mean, I have recently, first of all, let me step back and say what OTTRED was created for and what I do. When I started OTTRED, it was really the start of the streaming wave. And I was lucky enough to be really on a project that was then called Project Kangaroo, that was one of the foundation projects for streaming as we know it today. So after Project Kangaroo collapsed, I created a little bit after I continued to do other things, but an advisory which really operated at the intersection between content, technology, and monetization. And then obviously audience is the glue that brings all of that together. Why? Because it was a transformational moment when the TV industry, the entertainment industry was really then very limited data capabilities, not a lot of insights except for the formal channels. And very much a B2B environment and a passive environment. And this was changing, and the business models were changing, and I was quite fascinated by that. Since then, the rest is history. We've seen Netflix grow, we've seen all the other streaming services grow, and we've seen technology deliver a lot of innovation and change. So without meaning to, I sort of set up an innovation hub because my clients came from across the industry. Typically, I'd have a client that was a traditional programming or content client, a client that was a tech client, and a client that was looking for market growth opportunities. So and mix it up. So I was lucky. I almost created my own little innovation hub through this period, and it's been fantastic to watch all of the different changes that's happened then.
You timed that well, Nat. So if I've got my timings right, you started OTTRED in 2012, which would have been a perfect time for the kind of thin end of the wedges, what everybody now has in their living room is streaming. Can you remember the moment, Nat, where you thought, I'm going to do this, I'm going to set up my own brand? And are you surprised that here you are in 2023, about to go into 2024, having done everything that moment would have represented in your life and your career?
Well, to be honest, the motivations for me at that stage wasn't in terms of setting up my own brand and my own agency. I was motivated by two things. I was a working mother, and I had a very demanding job in various large corporates. And in those days, I didn't have the flexibility to be able to navigate both. So it was important to me to do something where I could, and that wasn't immediately available in a corporate environment in those days. You couldn't work remotely. the more senior you got within a company, you had to be available not only for international travel, but for your team at your desk. So that was a big motivation for me, thinking that through. And a lot of it happened organically. People came to me and asked me to help them in various things, and I'd be helping quietly a bunch of people. And I thought, well, maybe I could do this for myself. And I'd seen a couple of projects collapsed, and I'd done project work, so I was confident in project work. So it was moving from project work to multi-client work. So that was a natural evolution. And passion for the industry, wanting to understand the industry, meant that I wanted to work in an environment where I was touching several points of the industry and not just in a silo doing one thing. So all of that sort of made me naturally gravitate towards this. But I'll be completely candid, it happened more organically than anything else. It was just a question of having a bit of, just holding my breath and just doing it.
In a few moments like that, Nat. I've got the list of organisations here that you worked at before you started Atonic Digital. There's some impressive names there. just run us through, for people who are listening or watching on the LinkedIn Live, the organisations that you worked at that gave you the springboard of experience that allowed you to set up what has been such a successful brand for over a decade now.
I really, my background is as a lawyer, and I was actually originally a project finance lawyer, and I've always been quite entrepreneurial. So my law firm sent me to France at one stage to do business development for the Australian government, various things, but not related to entertainment. When I moved to England, I was always passionate about entertainment industry, and I was lucky enough to land a role at Disney when we were launching, and this is going to date me, but when we were launching Disney channels across the globe. So the linear kind, not the OTT kind. And through that experience, which was an incredible experience, I spent 7 years at Disney in senior management roles, becoming part of the senior management team there a long time ago. But it helped me build confidence in what it's like to launch companies in new environments. And in those days, obviously, digital pay TV channels were quite innovative and new. When I left Disney, actually, because I was a bit of a workaholic, I became quite sick from that, and I had to take a leave of absence. I had 2 young children, so I had time to reflect. And during that time, people came to me. So I started working with E Entertainment, as it then was, and a couple of other brands, and developed a portfolio of clients unexpectedly that gave me the courage to do, and the inspiration that this is quite a fun thing to do. I was working across multiple brands, so that's E was interesting in those times. Kevin then went on to lead NBC Universal, which was interesting. I was then called in to NBC Universal as their VP of Europe at a time when there was massive changes. I think they had 4 changes of presidents in the year. So that was also interesting and inspired me not to fear change, but to ride with it. And then through that, I started to become aware of the opportunities for VOD, as it then was, and was lucky enough to be offered a position at 4OD, as it then was, to do third-party content, which was fascinating for me because that was one of the very, very first incarnation of streaming. Deep dived into that with Project Kangaroo. That inspired me because that was a project which brought together all of the broadcasters here before any major streamer had launched. This is pre-Hulu launch. So that inspired me in one way, which was here were a whole bunch of content producers thinking about the future of the consumer and thinking about leveraging what was then called the internet or online rather than streaming, and building an accessible service. Yeah, I know I'm really dating myself.
But you know what makes me smile about it now? I remember in series 2 doing an interview with Andrew Cross from Newtech, and him talking about these days when putting content over the internet was a concept that seemed to have validity. And Fast forward to 2023, and here we are. My kids the only thing they watch are streaming
Correct.
services. That's the only thing they watch. I'm interested to ask you this now. If you think back to your Walt Disney days and setting up the kind of linear content provision, and now you look at Fast and everything that represents in terms of the monetization. I love that triangulation you mentioned earlier between tech, content, monetization, with the audience at the core of it. Do you see similarities now with a lot of this conversation about Fast TV and what you were doing at Disney, setting up those channels?
Oh my goodness, yes. What the French say, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. This is absolutely it. What's interesting with tech, and tech is not a means to an end. What it is a great enabler, and it's an accelerator. And this is the joy of working in this space and in this intersection. There are a lot of similarities when I hear the conversations about Fast and what it is. And, if you talk to someone like Olivier from Pluto TV, Olivier Joly, he will tell you that, their schedulers are a mix. I did an IBC keynote with the head of product for Pluto TV and all of Paramount. And one of the about the future of TV, and one of the conversations we had there was talking about how actually there is a mix of in their teams of traditional TV schedulers, content schedulers, and people who are looking at the data and driving decisions on the basis of that on a daily basis in order to program Pluto. I think there is a lot of commonalities. TV is TV. You have to engage in an audience. Fast is an appointment to view. At the end of the day, it is a much bigger platform on which to build multiple, but it's like having a digital pay TV service on speed, and it's also free, ad funded. So it's really, there are a lot of commonalities. There are some differences, and I think those differences are exciting. I don't think we've seen the full difference play out yet in terms of the programmatic advertising side of things and what that enables from a commercial point of view. But yes, plus ça change, plus c'est la même chose. What is so interesting is that human nature is human nature. The consumer is the consumer. At the end of the day, a good story draws people in, and the methodology of how it draws them in, actually, it's just an accelerated version of what was.
Yeah. So let me ask you this question now. The theme of Series 4 is about innovation. It's a topic that I'm passionate about within the sector at the moment.
Yes.
I'm interested in what your posture is bouncing from this topic around Fast. Is Fast an example of the sector being innovative or just recycling old stuff that worked? And I guess the extension to that, which we'll come on to, is from the posture that you've got, and I know that you speak to a lot of very influential people in the sector. You've got great network, great relationships globally across the sector. Do you think, and do you get a vibe across the sector globally that we are being innovative enough? First question first, is Fast a representation of innovation?
I think it's a great question. I think it is in some instances, but I don't think we've seen the real innovation yet, if that makes sense. Why is it innovative? Sorry about that. Why is it innovative? It's because it's giving access to, first of all, the barrier to entry was low at one stage, and therefore it's allowed people with brands and special interests to launch services that wouldn't have been available to the consumer. So it's become a little bit more YouTube-like in its ability to actually deliver content that's really relevant directly to an individual. However, in doing so, it's now tightening up slightly in terms of its access. And I think where it's less innovative is the type of content that it's delivering at the moment. A lot of it is library content. But hey, we're going to see a lot of the major content producers producing premium content and launching their own services. And that will deliver it's a natural state of evolution. Most tech enablements change and they allow people to go in with archive content. And so Netflix used a lot of archive content when it launched. You'll see a lot of innovation happening, I think, not just in terms of how the content is delivered. So I expect a lot more interactivity in the way that Fast is delivered. I expect great innovation in terms of once they solve the issue of programmatic and ad serving, I expect
Yeah.
different types of business models to arise from that we hadn't had before, that will be enabled through tech, like content commerce and shoppability becoming a part of all of those business models. So I believe that it is innovative. I think the execution of it, as is always the execution when you get a new platform and a new delivery system, tends to rely on traditional content, because that's what's immediately available, and that's immediately what it does is refresh the monetization opportunities around that. However, it is innovative because it allows a new, it is basically linear channels moving to a much bigger canvas, which is, the digital canvas, but through it will come other innovation.
You just mentioned something that I spoke to a guy called Christian Toxvig about. I'm not sure if you know Christian. Yesterday. Yeah. So Christian was pivotal in the setup of iFlix. He was global VP of commercial VP and head of BD for Bedrock Streaming, obviously owned by RTL, owned by Bertelsmann, et cetera, et cetera. And he and I got into a conversation yesterday about a topic you just mentioned, which I think would represent innovation, which is, the ability to commercialize in content purchases. He said to me, Chris, this has been discussed forever. This has been discussed forever, Chris, since the internet came online. He'd been working at Metro News, and then he kind of moved over to Northern and Shell with OK Magazine, print type stuff early on in his career. And he said, Chris, has been discussed forever. No one's mastered it yet. What would represent innovation to you, Nathalie?
Well, innovation's here actually in that space. It just hasn't been executed en masse on CTV yet. It's happened on the .coms now. You have technology that enables people to purchase at the point of inspiration without coming out of your ecosystem or your environment, which that's the innovation. I mean, yes, purchasable content has been around for years. What hasn't been around for years is two things. One is the consumer's ability to do so and stay within the system. So otherwise you're just paying someone to farm them out to someone else. And the other, the user journey has been not a great one. And the other that hasn't been around, that is around now, is consumer trust in the purchasing process, because what we've seen is social commerce through TikTok and through Instagram has created a whole wave of people who are now comfortable and expect to be able to purchase things from the point of inspiration within a piece of content. And that behavioral change, which is always the hardest part of getting adoption of anything, has now happened because of social. So what I am anticipating and deeply expecting to happen is that very shortly we will start to see on the TV screens the execution of that. At the moment, they're looking at QR codes, which is a little bit of it's not a perfect solution, but there are other solutions, like the company I've been, one of my clients, Voodoo, and others, who are able to deliver an experience within the content. So what I'm expecting to see, therefore, is a new revenue stream where, much like you're seeing happen on .coms, you'll be able to purchase items, or even in social, you'll be able to have that same experience in a fast channel. I think that's inevitable. And I think that consumer behavior has actually moved in that direction and expects that.
I think you're right. I think you're absolutely right. And when I look at other sectors as well, closely related but not identical to, it concerns me sometimes, Nathalie, that I think they are making advances more quickly than the kind of the OTT broadcast media space, and inevitably that leads to a point of convergence where there's M&A activity, where some other sectors potentially take over. I remember seeing that in telecoms, in my telecoms days, where you had narrowband, broadband, and eventually everything ended up as data. Correct. You mentioned Voodoo a second ago, and I know that as part of your fractional work through Atonic, you've been working with Voodoo Talk to me a little bit about the type of value that you add nowadays to organizations, Natalie. You know, with all of the experience you've got, not just of these big corporates, but I know you've got a massive profile at events like IBC. You're regularly a panel speaker. I happen to know that within the last few months, you were nominated as one of the top 50 women game changers as well. That's just a testament to, you know, one aspect of the gravity associated to your profile. But what is it that you do now? What do you enjoy doing? And, you know, what does the next chapter look like for Atonic?
Oh gosh, let me unpack that. Well, there's the next pack. So what I've been doing very much is helping companies either with go-to-market strategies or propositions, or understanding, you know, how to basically build, scale, and grow their business, or for companies that have a new piece of tech or a new content, how to, you know, what giving them an idea about what the market opportunities are. I've been doing a lot of that, and in doing so, I think with some of my clients, I've dug a little bit more deeply and helped them actually almost be an interim kind of resource to help them in their initial steps to scale and globalize their businesses. I also do a lot of trend analysis for clients. And not only for clients, but for people in the industry generally. I am privileged enough to have lots of conversations with different people in positions of, you know, in commercially influential positions where we talk about what's happening, and I try and provide them with a framework or information that helps them have a sense of the ecosystem beyond their day-to-day activities. So I do a lot of that. I intend to do more of the writing and the commenting on the industry, because I do a lot privately and I haven't made it public. So I think there is a really good conversation to start around innovation and change in our industry, but also what we can learn that we do well as well, and you know, have more confidence in our ability to be agile and to navigate and be inspired by other industries, as you say. So I do that. The fractional side of things is me stepping in. I like to stand behind rather than in front of someone. So it's stepping in behind some organization and helping them really resource up and link up and build up and connect up to success.
Which element of it do you still really love? What ignites you, Nat?
I get excited by new spaces. I get excited by change, because change brings with it opportunity for growth. You know, obviously from a business point of view, and I would apply that to that personally as well. I think you know, it's a privilege to be in an industry that is dynamic and changing, and that change may feel painful sometimes, but inevitably it leads to a lot of excitement, a lot of opportunities. And also, what excites me in this industry are the people. I think, you know, we are all really blessed to be in an industry where what we talk about, what we look at, and what we consume on a daily basis is what we work with. And, you know, storytelling is very powerful, and how it manifests itself in people's lives is very powerful. So to be in that industry and to be able to experience it as a product that we use every day and also work in it is really excites me. And to listen and talk to some extraordinary people that we have in our industry over the years, and the friendships I've made with that really excites me.
I spoke to Jeremy Bradley at Cinemedia last week. He's their director of ad tech sales. Yeah. And I asked him what his reflections were of 2023. And he said, Chris, it's been for many organizations a course correction year. And he was excited about 2024. How would you answer the same question, Nat? What are your reflections of 2023, and what are you expecting 2024 is going to look like for the industry?
Big question, but a good question, of course. I actually think it is a course correction. I tend to think that the headlines tend to simplify the situation. You know, there's a lot of inevitability about this course correction, and it's happening. You know, the industry doesn't exist in a vacuum. It's happening in parallel with a lot of economic uncertainty, geopolitical uncertainty in the world, and we cannot ignore that completely. as one of the fundamentals of that change. However, I am excited by it. I think what that means is that we have a tendency to see the industry and to analyze it and see the headlines in terms of almost like siloed. So we were doing this, and now we're doing streaming wars, now we're doing fast. The fact is the ecosystem is much more complex than that. And the consumer, who is after all at the center of our industry, the individual that, like you and me, who go and watch content, goes and lives and exists every day in a very big ecosystem. So this course correction is a course correction, but it's not an end. It's a renewal, and it's a growth opportunity. I'm hoping that in 2024 we will see a broader base of business models. So we'll see much more hybrid models forming, a more sophisticated approach to how the consumer is served in the industry in terms of the content that we see. A little bit of, obviously I'm passionate about content commerce. I think that's going to come into play in a very big way. And you've seen Amazon make announcements. You've seen Walmart talk about funding content within its retail media network. So what used to be sponsored content is going to have a new life. We're going to see sponsored content. We're going to see what was affiliate content change. I think gaming, and we'll see that conversion, that collapsing of universes as you talked about, with gaming and TV and everything, learning from each other, and more bundling. Obviously, bundling is a very old thing, but it's coming back again with a vengeance. I predicted that it would come back about 18 months ago. It's just starting. I think we're going to see a lot of that now too, because the economic models that we have are not rational if they just stand alone. We've sort of co-opted an economic model and became hooked to the idea of subscription as a single point of monetization. It was never going to be a single point of monetization. We're going to see everybody try and build out their monetization opportunities. In terms of content and creativity, I think we're going to see a lot of interesting stuff happen. Of course, we're going to play catch up with the writer's strike in the US, but we'll also, I think you're going to see again convergence between influencer content, led content, and other things coming into play. Probably more of that. I think AI obviously is going to have a very big impact on the industry, and that will play out. AI is a very generic term, so it's all that manifestations of that. I won't go into the detail here for this, but
you know what, Nat? I heard someone this week almost call out AI, and they said it was someone that's had some massive roles in North America, a really great guy. And he said to me, you know what, Chris, AI is going to be like year 2000 stuff. Everyone came running out of the blocks. Everything was about AI. In 6 months, I promise you, there's going to be something else. It won't be so much about AI. Now, part of me empathizes with him because I worked through the year 2000 stuff, and that's one of those, no planes fell out of the sky. But similarly, I also look at these snippets from newspapers of people that said in the year 2000, the internet's never going to come to anything. Yes. And I'm kind of looking at it thinking, maybe it's a halfway house between those two things when it comes to AI. What's your prediction in 6 months? And I'll book another podcast with you for 6 months to see whether or not your prediction comes true.
I think AI is already and will have a profound effect on our industry. Probably not the way we think. It's existed already. I had a client 5 years ago that was using machine learning to create, and is now fully launched in the US, Zone TV, to create the ability to take social content and build out linear type fast channels through that. Wow. It's existing. It's been existing for 5 or 6 years very successfully. This is not new. What is new are, generative AI and the ability of the individual consumer to actually touch on it and understand it, the ability of creatives to use the tools easily, and so the barrier to entry to use of AI in our industry, in the creative sphere, has actually lowered, and that's creating an ability to access that, the tech and use it. So we're going to see a lot of experimental stuff with it. And so to those naysayers who think it's going to create all sorts of issues, well, actually, I've talked to a lot of people about this on all sides of the spectrum. There's also something that says that it will also enable a lot of people to do a lot of interesting things. So in terms of content creation, obviously, we're going to see, as we did with social and the ability for individuals to create content, some new types of content being created much more easily and with greater, lower costs to entry. So the question will be, how will that work within the existing system of premium content, which is much more expensive and layered, and what will that mean? There's also technology that makes dubbing much more effective and much more real. How is that going to? There's all sorts of areas. I know special effects is the big area where AI is driving a lot of value. So I believe it's not going to go away. The question is what impact it has on human capital, and what impact it has on people's skills and resourcing, and what impact it has on monetization potential and distribution.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you had workaholic tendencies at an earlier point in your career, and that manifested itself in counterproductive ways for your health at that point. When you look at the industry now, do you think the same sort of pressures exist in corporates or on people generically? Do you think things have moved forward when it comes to people recognizing mental health and not being a workaholic, or do you think that there's an increased amount of pressure nowadays to move fast and you stay ahead of the competition and everything that means personally?
I mean, my personal story is that I was working around the clock on very big deals for Disney, and I ended up getting a brain tumor with 2 young children under the age of 3, and that was a transformational moment in my life because I had to leave and heal myself and go back into the workforce. It caused me to really think about these issues. And mental health, obviously, is a very big part of that as well. I actually think we do have vocabulary now to articulate it. I think the challenge is when you have a global ecosystem, and when you have ease of access, as you do, is to build the boundaries for people so that they understand how to manage their workflows and know when to stop and when to look after themselves within that, and are supported by the organization in doing so. And sometimes there is a disconnect between the intention of an organization to look at the welfare of its of the people in it, and, for instance, a startup environment, which is very high energy and where you're often under-resourced and underfunded to deliver your vision. You're very passionate, and so your natural tendency is to override any boundaries and just push ahead because you want to actually make this happen. I think that's where I think the caution happens in the industry. I think there's been some progress in that we are articulating the issue of health, and the cost of health is now well recognized in terms of organizations, including mental health. But I'm not sure that it's fully fleshed out because of the nature of how our industry works, because of the globalization of the industry, because not all cultures have caught up with that.
It's interesting, now it's obviously COP28 here in Dubai at the moment where I am, which is all about climate change. And I've been interviewing, as part of a separate podcast series, global leaders and influencers in that sphere. And it led me to thinking around our sector, broadcast and media, and what attention and respect we pay towards sustainability. I did a poll, you may have seen it in the OTTRED WhatsApp group, and only one person responded out of the hundreds of people that we've got in there saying that their business has got a global head of sustainability. I don't hear that talked about very much in broadcast and media. I hear a bit talked about in the media about the topic, but in terms of within the sector, as I said, you operate at a very high level. Do you hear it frequently enough in those conversations among leaders?
It's a very good call out, Chris. And it's a call out which impacts the credibility of the leadership in our industry to younger generations, for whom this is an absolutely critical point of stress in their lives. We have been privileged to not have to really think about this. And by the way, one of my first gigs was as an environmental lawyer. So just FYI, straight out of university. But the conversation really didn't become a corporate conversation until fairly recently, to be honest. So it's a fairly new conversation for many of the leadership, and that is not a good thing. I think there's not enough awareness of the consequence, and there's not enough accountability for the fact that part of the talent that we wish to bring into the industry and keep in the industry is very concerned about this, and we should be concerned because we have all created the issue. So no, not enough. I think this is one of the fundamental issues that exists in the world at the moment. And so I think you're right. It's a very good call out. I don't hear a huge amount of conversation at very senior levels about sustainability where it should be. It tends to be left to more, and I'm being completely candid, to more to strategic kind of corporate focus. But individually, of course, I do see that there is change happening, including people becoming more aware of the issues and changing, how they think about those issues.
Maybe that can be part of our mutual agenda for 2024, Nathalie. We'll try and be the change agents within the sector.
It's an
bringing it back to you a little bit. There will be people listening to you thinking, wow, I hope I can get to that level one day in my own career. No, you don't think that, but I can almost guarantee you there will be. Working in human capital and recruitment, you speak to a lot more junior people. I'm lucky enough to speak to a lot of people like you, but people at a more junior level see you on LinkedIn, they see you on these panels and at IBC and all of that sort of stuff. What advice would you give to someone who's looking at the sector, really excited about the future and thinking, what can I learn from Nathalie and her career? What have been the hallmarks of your success?
I think agility in how I do and think about things and where I am. So I have never measured myself by where I was or the title that I had at the time. That's not what motivates me. And I think what's given me the freedom to be able to experience what I do and to be versatile enough to experience it is just to be open, follow your passion, think about the trends, always build your network. And by that, I mean, listen and help both as you move through what you do. Show your enthusiasm, show your passion. Don't hesitate to speak up about that. And, just, I don't know, those are the things I think that are critical in building a career. There's lots of people who do it with, 3-year plans. I have done it pretty organically in my case, through circumstance and through opportunity that I've had the fortune of being and receiving those opportunities. And there's an old saying, which is true, which is preparation meeting opportunities is what delivers, what anyone would term as success. And so I would just say, keep your passion open for the industry. Look widely because the industry is changing. Don't think that what you are now is what you'll be tomorrow. Be open and always think about bringing value both to the industry and to yourself in the process. Does that make sense to you?
100%. Final question for you, Nat, and I'm looking forward to your answer to this one, both as a friend and as someone who I look up to in the industry. If there was a piece of advice that you could give to the younger you, what would it be?
That's a really good question. I would say be more, as a woman and as a young woman in the industry, don't be afraid to have a voice and to say what you think authentically in a room, and be more confident in yourself. I know this is going to sound a bit strange, in being able to get to the places that you think that you want to get to, being able to add value where you want to add value. Do not make yourself small because there are other people in the room. Everybody has something to contribute, and just be your own advocate is what I would say, in a positive way, not in an egotistical way.
Yeah, absolutely. Nat, that's it for your OTT Red Spotlight podcast. Please, can I say to you that you are you're an influencer, you're a business leader, you're a thought leader. You've earned your space. You've earned your spot, in my opinion, at what so many people recognize as the value that you bring to our sector. And I always find our interactions to be wonderfully disarming, and you always speak what you think, and it's usually so well informed. So, Nat, it's been a pleasure interviewing you for this episode of the OTTRED Spotlight podcast, and I want to say thank you.
Well, thank you, and thank you for being so kind about me. I feel it's a real privilege to be here today. Thank you. Thank you very much.